guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are making this very special Dumbo cake. To begin, I have printed out a photo of the Dumbo I wanted to recreate out of fondant. I have printed the image the exact size that I want to use, as this is now going to become the template. Once happy with the size, I used tape to cover up Dumbo before I cut him out. This acts as a laminate for the template, making it easier and stronger to cut around when placed on top of fondant. Once Dumbo was all taped up and cut out, I then started rolling out grey fondant. Grey fondant that I'm using today, I rolled out to a thickness of about 1 centimetre. I then laid my Dumbo template on top of the fondant to cut around. As you can see in the footage, I'm using my scalpel to cut around the template of Dumbo. Once all cut out, I remove the template and then go around and start pinching the edges of the fondant which I cut out together to make the Dumbo less harsh and more bubble-like. Once I was happy with how Dumbo was looking, I moved on to using a ball tool to start making creases in the fondant. Laying the template back onto the fondant and then using the ball tool to drag over where I wanted to leave an impression on the fondant, removing the template and then marking the creases in his little legs and on his face and ears. Then mark out where his hat will go, and then I start working on his mouth and trunk. While using the ball tool to mark out Dumbo's trunk and face, I like to have his template next to me so that I can see that I'm doing it in the right area and it looks similar to how he does in the picture. I'm going back and starting to mark out the feet to make sure that they really stand out. I also make an impression where his big ear is going to go at the front of the picture. All of the footage that you see today is sped up quite a bit as I wanted to include all of the footage of me actually making Dumbo. Once I have marked out the ear on the fondant, I also start to score out the collar Dumbo's wearing. Using a large ball tool, I start to work on the inner ear, starting to smooth and press out the fondant so that it's sunken in slightly from the rest of his ear. By doing this, I'm trying to give the outer part of the ear more definition and creating room so that I can stick some light pale fondant on the inner part of the ear. Roll out the pinky fondant as thin as possible before cutting out the inner ear using the Dumbo template. Once cut out, I stick that to the grey fondant. I just use my finger to smooth and buff out the pink fondant so that it sticks nicely to the grey. Now I'm going to work on Dumbo's collar and hat. Using red and yellow fondant, I roll out both between 2 to 3 millimeters thick. I start cutting out the yellow hat by placing the template on top and cutting around it. I then do the same with the collar in red. I stick these to the Dumbo in the correct place. With Dumbo's hat, I wanted to make sure that the hat almost looked 3D. So I cut the bottom of the hat out again with yellow fondant, layering that on top of the original cutout. Using the ball tool, I add some creases to the hat to make it look more worn, just like in the cartoon. I then finish cutting out the yellow part of the collar. I stick that down to the red fondant with a little bit of water. Then taking my edible marker, I'm going to go around the edge of the hat to outline it. I continue to do this with the collar and then the rest of Dumbo. I'm now going to work on Dumbo's face and the big front-facing ear. Grabbing back the face template, I start making out the creases where his ear is connected to his face, eyebrows, eyes, and then his creases on his trunk. Once marked, I remove the template and make those lines more defined with the ball tool. For Dumbo's eyes, I did the same thing as the big ear and pressed down the grey fondant to make room for white and blue fondant. Add 2 small balls of white fondant into the spaces that I have made for his eyes. I then add light blue fondant on top for his irises. At this point, I wasn't happy with the ear at the front standing out enough, so I started to roll out a log of grey fondant, which I'm going to attach to his face and then be the outline around the top of his ear. Once I was happy with the placement, I then stuck that down with water. Now going back in with the black edible marker to colour in Dumbo's pupils. At this point I realised I had put the blue fondant in the wrong spot, so I've just taken it off and re-added it where it's supposed to go, and then add the pupil in with the black edible marker. Now grabbing a fine paintbrush and black edible paint, I'm going to finish outlining Dumbo. So use the paint to paint his eyebrows on his face and the creases in his trunk. Then use a combo of the edible paint and the marker to outline Dumbo's big ear. I'm now using the edible paint to outline both his eyes. I used my paintbrush and edible paint to go back in and make some of the outlines slightly bolder. Once I was happy with how my Dumbo was looking, I then placed the fondant on a chopping board lined with baking paper to set overnight. I didn't include footage of me cutting out the name, but if you follow my Star Wars cake tutorial, you can follow the same principles and cut out any message or name in whatever font you choose. I have included footage of me painting my dried letters and number in gold. Now to make a balloon, I rolled out navy blue fondant 5 to 6 millimeters in thickness. I laid cling wrap over the top of the fondant and using a teardrop cutter I cut out the balloon. Using my finger to soften the edges, I then use a star cutter to cut out the end of the balloon. I then cut that part that I want to use off with my scalpel. I attached that to the bottom of the balloon. I rolled out a tiny bit of white fondant which was tapered at either end of the log so it could look like a small catch light. Made 3 balloons for this cake, 2 navy and 1 light blue. I also pushed floral wire into the bottom of the balloon to make it look like a string. I then let everything dry and set overnight. Now to mask and decorate this cake. Today I'm using a 6-inch square mud cake. If you want the recipe and to see how I cut and fill my cakes, I'll add the link in the description box below. Using American buttercream today, coloured blue. To ice my cakes, I add a lot of buttercream to the top. Once the top is smooth, I then use my palette knife to spread the excess buttercream down the sides. Once happy with the application, I take my cake scraper to smooth the sides out and remove excess buttercream. Keeping the raw edge today as I want the cake to look like the sky, I then clean up my cake board using my palette knife. Then roll out white fondant to make clouds. Using the technique that I used to create the balloons, I lay cling wrap over the top of the white fondant using cloud cutters to cut out the shape. And using my fingers to soften the edge to ensure that the cloud looks like a bubble. Once I cut them out, I start sticking the clouds to 3 out of the 4 sides of the cake. Buttercream is still tacky, so it's easier to press the clouds into the cake in whatever pattern you like. I just use 2 clouds on each side of the cake minus the front. Now the front of the cake, I stick Dumbo slightly off center, more to the right. I'm adding 2 balloons and a cloud in the free space. Once Dumbo is attached, I add a cloud on the left near Dumbo's feet. Adding my 2 balloons just above Dumbo's trunk, was trying to make it look like Dumbo's flying with 2 balloons. Once they were added, I bent some floral wire into the balloons and connected them to Dumbo's trunk to make it look like he was holding them. I then add the gold 2 just behind Dumbo at the top of the cake and then the name Edward at the front. That's how I made this Dumbo cake. If you liked this video and want to see more tutorials, all things baking and cake decorating, please like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any videos. I upload every Wednesday. See you next time!